Khun Sa, Opium Drug King, was born in 1934 in a small village in Northern Shan State to an ethnic Shan mother and a Chinese father. He grew up as an orphan as his father died when he was only 3. His mother remarried the local tax collector of the small town of Mong Tawm, but 2 years later she died as well. While his 3 stepbrothers went to missionary schools and were given the Christian names Oscar, Billy, and Morgan, the young Khun Sa was raised by his Chinese grandfather amid the poppy fields of Loi Maw mountain in Northern Shan State. His only formal education consisted of a few years as a temple boy in a Buddhist monastery. Khun Sa controlled his drug empire for over 30 years and reportedly earned billions of dollars in the drug trade. Also known as Chang Chifu or Sao Mong Quan, Khun Sa was born in Loi Maw of Munja in eastern Myanmar, dubbed the Opium King of the Golden Triangle. He was also the leader of the Shan United Army and the Mong Thai Army. For a while he was based in Thailand. The Thai army attacked his camp and drove him back to Myanmar, where he set up his own private fiefdom in East Shan State. Khun Sa's real name is Chang Chifu. He adopted the pseudonym Khun Sa, meaning Prince Prosperous. In his youth he trained with the Kuomintang, which had fled into the border regions of Burma from Yunnan upon its defeat in the Chinese Civil War. He got involved in the drug trade at an early age by working with Chinese Kuomintang soldiers that lived in the eastern Shan State. In 1969, when he was 36, he was imprisoned in Mandalay for drug trafficking and stayed there for 5 years until his friends broke him out. He fled to Thailand and organized a drug network and army. In the 1990s, he controlled an army of 3,000 men that watched over 600 tons of opium produced in Myanmar and 60 tons produced in Thailand. Khun Sa era in the Golden Triangle. In the early 1970s, as the Vietnam War was winding down and coming to an end, heroin exportation from parts of Southeast Asia controlled by Khun Sa increased and the Golden Triangle became a major source for raw opium in the profitable China white drug trade, which picked up momentum in the late 1970s. In the 1980s, Khun Sa became a heroin supplier as opium production in Burma increased under the rule of the State Law and Order Restoration Council, SLORC, the Burmese junta regime. The single largest heroin seizure at that time was made in Bangkok, a 1,000-kilogram shipment of heroin en route to New York City that the U.S. believed originated from the Golden Triangle. In 1990, a U.S. court indicted Khun Sa on heroin trafficking charges for importing 1,600 kilograms of heroin into New York City over the course of 18 months, as well as holding him responsible for the source of the heroin seized in Bangkok. In 1993, the Thai Army, with support from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, launched a campaign in which thousands of acres of opium poppies in the Golden Triangle were destroyed. In the mid-1990s, the Golden Triangle region was the world's leading producer of opium, producing 2,500 tons annually. According to U.S. drug experts, opium and heroin were smuggled out of Burma on drug trafficking routes mainly through Laos, to southern China, Cambodia, and Vietnam. In 1994, it was estimated that Khun Sa and the United States Army controlled 75% of the heroin originating in the Golden Triangle. A Panthay Chinese Muslim from Burma, Ma Zhengguen, assisted Khun Sa in selling his heroin in North Thailand. In 1996, Khun Sa retired and the United States Army took over many of the areas he controlled. In January 1996, Khun Sa surrendered to SLORC. The U.S. didn't believe it and thought it was just a deal in which Khun Sa agreed to end his 30-year-old revolutionary war against the government in exchange for retaining control of his opium trade. In May 1996, Khun Sa formally surrendered to the Burmese generals. He welcomed the leader of the Burmese army with scotch and his representatives and those of the Myanmar government exchanged gifts, posed for photographs and addressed each other with polite honorifics. Khun Sa told Lieutenant General Kai Abie before a television camera, "If I have done anything wrong in my life, please forgive me." The general said, "We must forgive him because he surrendered and has given us no problems." A ceremony was later held in which 4,000 Mong Thai soldiers formally surrendered and a cache of weapons, including surface-to-air missiles, was turned over to the Myanmar government. Eventually 12,000 of Khun Sa's soldiers surrendered and gave up 7,500 weapons. It is believed that Khun Sa surrendered to the Myanmar government to keep the WA Army from overrunning his Doilang Mountain operation on the Thai border and taking over his smuggling routes into Thailand. Burmese officials said in January 1996 that Khun Sa did not want to face drug smuggling charges in the U.S. Khun Sa left the Shan states for Rangoon, but he was never arrested by the government. Burmese officials refused to extradite him, and he lived the rest of his life in the Rangoon area with significant investments in Yangon, Mandalay, and Tongai. Even though the Burmese generals had vowed to try Khun Sa if they ever caught him, they essentially let him go. At first they took him into custody and disbanded his 10,000-man army. It is believed that Khun Sa cut a deal with the Burmese generals to surrender in return for a promise of amnesty. It is also believed that Khun Sa was able to continue his drug business in return for ending his insurgency movement. A State Department official told the New York Times the surrender appeared to be the result of a successfully concluded peace agreement between the Burmese government and the representatives of Khun Sa. A member of Khun Sa's army told Reuters that Khun Sa paid millions to a general to guarantee his peaceful retirement after his surrender. Bert Lintner wrote on Asia Online, remnants of his 20,000-strong army refused to honor the agreement with the government and went underground as the newly formed Shan State Army, South. They are still fighting for their ideals in the hills around Hamong, now a government-controlled town and still a bustling center for the local drug trade. Khun Sa's surrender and new deal with the Myanmar government was interpreted differently by one unexpected quarter. Barry Broman, the Yangon CIA station chief in the 1990s, said in an interview with the Asia Times newspaper edition on June 3, 1997, that on their own, the Burmese Myanmar effected the capture of Khun Sa. They made a major dent in the drug trade and we gave them no credit. In reality, Khun Sa was never captured. He gave himself up in exchange for a lucrative deal for himself and his family. And there was never any dent made in the narcotics trade he promoted. If Khun Sa's surrender proved anything, it was that the networks that controlled the trade were able to survive even without their so-called kingpins. Khun Sa's retirement. After the surrender in 1996, Khun Sa disappeared. For the most part it is believed he lived quietly in Yangon in a compound with bodyguards and spent much of time spoiling his grandchildren and tending his beloved Angora rabbits. It was said he was in poor health, suffering from a number of ailments. All requests to extradite were refused. Bert Lintner wrote on Asia Online, Khun Sa died on October 26, 2007 in Yangon at the age of 73. The cause of death was not known, though he had suffered from diabetes, partial paralysis, and high blood pressure. He is buried at Yue Cemetery, North Okalapa, Yangon Division, Burma. The fact that he spent the last years of his life incommunicado inside a compound protected by Myanmar's secret intelligence service gives some indication as to how important the country's ruling junta considered it after his surrender in January 1996 to keep him isolated and quiet.